Take a look at heavyweight. Let's break down a couple of matches here, right? And don't forget the old statistics. Stipe Miocic was the most successful heavyweight of all time because he defended the belt twice. Do you guys remember this? I mean, it was a big deal. No heavyweight in history had defended the belt twice. I was a training partner. I came through with Randy Couture. I couldn't believe when I heard that statistic that Randy hadn't done it. I had to go back and think about, man, is that true? Or when Maurice Smith had the belt, I mean, I could go back a long time. But man, is that true? Only twice? That's it? But guys, that's not likely to get beat anytime soon, no matter how amazing you think Francis is. Look at the big four. Surreal now, who looks to be the favorite. I think there's a little recency bias, and we're all still a little drunk on the excitement that is Surreal. You got Francis. Probably going to have to put him in 2. I think when that line comes out, Surreal's going to be the favorite. You guys ready for that? You then have Francis, right? 1 and 1A. We're close here. Do we have Jon Jones for conversation, if nothing else? Sure we do. Sure, he's in the conversation. And of course, you have Stipe. While Stipe might be the most successful heavyweight champion of all time, he's also the most disrespected. And he's getting disrespected right now, not by me. I'm putting him in the mix. But if you start to break that down, you start breaking down the parity, you start to see why nobody can defend that thing more than twice. I don't think there's one of those 4 guys that can defend it more than twice. I don't think there's any one of those 4 guys that could beat the other 3. That's my opinion. I don't think Jon Jones steps in, takes out Francis, takes out Surreal, and takes out Stipe any way that you want to do it. I think if Stipe gets in there, I mean, you want to know the best thing for Stipe in terms of getting his belt back is that Surreal beats Francis, in my opinion. Stipe versus Surreal is a very different match. Very different. Largely because of size. Surreal goes about 246. Stipe is going to get in there around that 246. Big problem that Stipe had, not only physically, but mentally, it bothered him as well, is how goddamn big Francis Ngannou was compared to him. Stipe said, I'm going to put some size back on. But all of a sudden, Stipe just puts on some natural size. Doesn't even bulk. He gets to 240, 241. We've seen him fight at that plenty of times. It's 241 the night he fought Verdun. Won the world championship just by example. 241 and 246 of Surreal, that's the same weight. They're the same thing. Stipe gets his hands on him, starts to use some of that. I mean, it's just a very different matchup. I would like Stipe's chances very much. And I would like them more so than I do Stipe versus Francis. I think that size matters. I think that Francis might have that puzzle figured out a little bit. So I'm painting a path for you of how Stipe gets back to the belt. But you would have to say the same thing about Jon Jones. I just don't know that he could go through all 3 of them. I don't think Surreal could go through all of them because I think that Stipe beats him. I don't think Stipe can go through all of them because I think he's going to have Francis problems. It's one of these things where how they get matched up and when they get matched up is going to be very relevant. And the number one thing that you can do isn't sit over here and argue this point with old Chael. The number one thing that you can do is get your license and get your ass in the octagon and find out, which is the one thing that Jon isn't doing. This ship is going to pass him by, guys. There was 3 people in the heavyweight division 1 week ago. 1 short week ago, there was 3. Now there's 4. And number 4, in many ways, I'm talking about Surreal, has gone to number 1. That pushes everybody down a slot. So where's Jon going to do and when is he going to do it? I don't think Jon owes it to us to give us an answer. We've been getting along just fine without him. I think that Jon might want to look at that himself and go, man, there's going to be a time for me to make my move. And Jon now has to ask himself, do I think I have better chances of beating Francis or Surreal? And moreover, now that those 2 are going to fight, who do I think is going to win? If Jon thinks he has better chances with Surreal, stay out of it. Let those 2 guys fight. Keep your fingers crossed that Surreal comes out on top. It's one of those things. It's one of the games that you have to play. It's a game that Jon is playing right now. I just don't know the answer as to who he thinks should win. I think I got more faith in Jon Jones at heavyweight than Jon does. I don't think that Jon ever needed to wait. I don't think he needed to get up to 240. I don't think he needed to go on Instagram with all those weirdos and doing pull-ups with chains. I mean, I thought the whole thing was weird. I thought that Jon Jones, just as tall as he was, as long as he was, and as good as he was, could have stepped into that division, become one of the lighter champions of all time, but he wouldn't have been the lightest. Randy Couture grabbed that thing at 221 pounds. Maurice Smith grabbed that thing at 210 pounds. So it's not as though he would have been the lightest, But I had a little bit more faith that John should have jumped in there. I need to stand back and listen to John. If he says he's not ready, if he says he can't do it, if he says I don't want to fight, I can't beat these guys, I do at some point have to listen to him. I just would have no idea what that hierarchy would be. And Dana's been extremely consistent, saying if John Jones would like to come back, he can have a title fight right away. Dana then at a separate press conference all last week said Stipe versus John. Stipe has already accepted the fight. Now, my interpretation of those two different statements was Dana saying, I got no pressure on him at all. Whatever he wants to do. Whatever he wants to do, including us showing him full respect and giving him a title opportunity. Or another match, whatever he wants to do. That's how I interpreted that. So who's going to get in there and when are they going to get in there? And how long do we get to include the name of John in the conversation when you got other guys out there going out doing some hard work? Curtis Blades. Curtis Blades who's willing to fight anybody, fought Ngannou twice. Nobody wants to fight him once, and Curtis is begging to fight him a third time. I mean, somebody like that we can't just deny forever. And what do you think happens to Derek Lewis? We just sweep him out? He's just done? He was just in a world title fight. I mean, he's not just done. And as much as Surreal has come up and captured everybody's imagination, I'm promising you guys, promise, there are 4 other guys under contract right now, not that need to be discovered, not that are in Cuba or in Sweden or in Dagestan, and they're just waiting to get their chance. I assure you they're already signed. The 2024 UFC Heavyweight Champion is none of the guys I've discussed today and is under contract right now. I guarantee you that. Got to get an opportunity. Got to get his shine out there. Got to get to a main event. Got to get a few interviews under his belt. But he's already found. And as much as there was 3 guys a week ago and now there's 4, and Surreal pushed them all down a notch, number 5 and number 6 and number 7 coming in, those just aren't going to be great spots to be in. You're going to sit back and try to tell what people remember you, which isn't going to be near as many as you think, how good you were back in your day and how you would have done in such and such situation. The older I get, the better I was. It's a real thing, and it's a real part of life. And I'm looking at guys right now who are going down that road. I can't put Stipe in there. Just if I go off of what Dana said, Stipe asked about the fight and said he will take the fight. When I talked to Stipe's old lady, she said the same thing. We heard John Jones, we're planning John Jones. That's 5 months ago. 4 months ago, Stipe, laser focused, wanted to get back in there. We're seeing what Surreal's doing. And by the way, what the hell is going on with Surreal? Surreal's coach and Francis's coach. Apparently that was the same trainer. The trainer is now only with Surreal, no longer with Francis. And Francis said something that hurt the trainer's feelings. I don't know this coach's name. I wish I did. Because I read an interview by him, and he is doing everything right, and it's extremely hard to do. The coach is remaining a gentleman. He is staying out of it. He is not being petty, while still trying to defend himself ever so slight. It's a very hard thing to do. And you got to be really careful as a coach that you show respect. I apologize, as an athlete, that you show respect to your coaches. You have to. And it's hard because they will get nothing else unless you give it to them. They will get no shine unless you're the one that gives it to them. And it's a really tough, the end of the night, the fighter leaves with all the money, all the praise, all the accolades, coach, none of it. But he was there anyway. He was the guy behind the guy. Somebody did it for the coach back when he was in his athletic days, and now he's paying it forward. But it's one of those things where the athlete's got to be very careful. And to hurt a trainer's feelings or to hurt a coach's feelings, you got to be careful about that because you don't want to do that. That's somebody who is being selfless, who's being timeless, who's giving to you, who's trying to help you. And if you ever get somewhere and you shut the door on that guy, it could be a very painful thing for that coach who didn't deserve it, who did have his heart in the right place. And I think that as this story starts to unfold, that their original trainer is now still there, but he's in Surreal's corner. I mean, that was a very big part of Gilbert Burns fighting Kamaru Usman, just to offer you guys a recent example. But we were told that story, and we were told it clearly. The Kamaru had left Florida, had gone to Colorado, that they used to be teammates and training partners. I mean, I could tie that back to Dillashaw and Garbrandt. That story works. That story is compelling. And the trainer has made his decision. He hasn't spoken up, but we know who he thinks is going to win. You remember this when Greg Jackson did this, John Jones and Rashad, and they're all in the same room. Greg Jackson stayed with John. Out goes Rashad. That was a business decision. Greg Jackson felt he had identified the better of the two fighters. He's going to ride with that guy. It was a business decision. So now we have a trainer that's still with Surreal. Was it for the same reasons? Is that a fair comparison that I just made? We don't have these pieces of the story yet, but I can't begin to look at this story from any lens and come to any other conclusion than how did we get here? If you're Francis and you believe in your heart that Surreal is the next best thing, why are you fighting Surreal? How did we get here? How did you turn down and refuse the Derek Lewis fight in the first place? How did you elevate and get Surreal to a world title fight, now of which he's the world champion, which by proxy makes him the number one contender for your belt? If any of these things are true, by the way, I should disclose that. I don't fully know that Francis has a fear or a respect of or a hesitation to fight Surreal. I don't know any of those things to be true. Francis is great big. He's undisputed. Give him the respect. But if the stories that we're hearing are true, and generally whenever you have teammate versus teammate and one guy says, nah, let's not do that, and the other guy says, well, we could do that. We do it all the time. We might as well go out there and get paid. Whatever those old boring cliches are that guys always throw out, you still know who's going to win. They just told you who's going to win. The guy that said, I'll do the fight is the guy that's going to win. Or at least based on the experience that they had. Sure, there's many a slip. I understand those things. But based on the experiences they had, you remember this back in the Tito-Chuck days. Tito going, oh, we'll never fight. We're friends. And Chuck going, yes, we're friends. So give me my opportunity, good buddy, old pal. And then they started talking. And Tito said, look, I had a hard time with him in the practice room. Chuck started talking and said, man, I didn't have all that hard of a time with him in the practice room. It's one of these things. I got to throw if out there. If I'm right and if Surreal is the kryptonite, if this is the monster in Francis's closet, Francis had a thumb on him. He was his buddy. He was his training partner. He was nowhere in the talks for a title fight. He was barely in the conversation for a main event. Francis could have kept his thumb on the guy. The miscalculation and the mismanagement of that entire situation, if the rumors are true and if the odds makers are right, is going to cost the Predator a title.